Hello and welcome back. Thanksgiving is over, so you better hope your favorite team is in a playoff position, as there's around a 76% chance that if they're in now, they'll make the playoffs. We had Kucherov with a 6-point game versus Carolina. By the way, what's going on with Carolina right now? Braden Point also had a 5-point game in that one. Cale Makar, 18 points in his last 10 games, so he's officially back. But this week, we got 53 games, a bunch of good schedules, so we won't be breaking things down by team because there's too many teams for that, but let's dive right into the schedule. So here's a look at Week 8, a number of teams with some 4-game weeks here, but at the bottom, the least games this week, 2 games for Edmonton, 2 games for LA, so you hope that you're facing McDavid this week. That would definitely help you, as their power play looked much better against Washington the other night, and they look like they're starting to get it back. So if you're playing against Draisaitl or McDavid this week, that's favorable for you. Same thing for LA. They're on fire right now. It's nice if you're playing against some of those guys that you're getting the week off. But the games this week that you want to focus on, all these teams up here: Boston, Buffalo, Columbus, Chicago, Colorado, Florida, Nashville, Rangers, Sharks, Lightning, Vegas, and Washington. All of those teams play 4 games this week, but a couple of those teams have better schedules than others. Columbus with the best schedule this week, a perfect light night. So Monday was not counted as a light night in terms of the way I did this analysis at the beginning of the year, but this is essentially a 4-game light night count for the Columbus Blue Jackets. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, the perfect schedule. They do have Boston twice, which is going to be tough. Boston lost to New York, but they're still tied for first in points in the entire league, so they're a very difficult team, and Columbus needs wins badly, so I wouldn't expect them to win both of those games, or maybe even one of those games, but they do have a couple of winnable matchups in the middle of the week that you could get some fantasy value out of, as we'll look at in a minute. The Rangers also have a pretty good schedule. They have 3 light nights. They got Buffalo on Monday, they got a TNT game on Wednesday against Detroit, and then a back-to-back on the road in Nashville and at home against San Jose. That's going to be a game you're going to want to pick up some Rangers, and we'll get into that in a little bit as well. Boston, you can see here again, they play those 2 light nights against Columbus, as we just mentioned. We've got Buffalo on here as well with the back-to-back. A lot of these teams play back-to-backs on the weekend, so you're going to want to access some of those backup goaltenders. Some of those are better than others. But for the most part, there's a lot of backup goaltenders that are going to be available this week. So we're not going to go into spot starts. We're going to look at goaltending trends, but we'll get to that in just a minute. As we work down the schedule, Chicago with a couple of, the weekend back-to-back, a couple of games here, but they're all on the heavier nights. So you got the Tuesday, the Thursday, Saturday. So all those are heavier nights, but they do have that Sunday game, and that is a winnable game against a team that's struggling a lot in Minnesota. Colorado, very solid week last week, and we'll get into a couple of their players. I mentioned Makar. Nichushkin is one of the guys that you have to keep on your radar if you're in a shallow league, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But Tampa Bay on Monday, then they've got a Thursday at Arizona, then you've got the weekend back-to-back. Florida, now that they've got their 2 defensemen back, things have changed, and Ekman-Larsson has dropped a little bit, as you would expect. Montour has been getting that power play time. Ekblad hasn't scored a point yet, but he's getting some shot volume, so he's pretty much owned up. But a lot of these guys might make an impact in terms of their offense. The only guy that might be available from this team might be Evan Rodriguez, but he's ice cold over the last couple of weeks, so we won't necessarily feature him here. There are some Preds that we're going to talk about, and they have a couple of heavy night games, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, so not the best schedule, but they do play 4 times. Tampa Bay with a front end back-to-back, which you could stream Jonas Johansson for one of those games if you want in the front half, and then get a streamer for the back half if you're looking for some goaltending volume, trying to find some streamers this week. And then they do play some of the heavier nights, so Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Vegas, they have the front back-to-back as well, so you could potentially try to pick up one of their goaltenders, but they're probably owned up. Hill and Thompson. This tandem has been one of the best in the league over the first 20-some-odd games, so they might not be available for you. And then they do have a bunch of heavy night games. And then the Capitals, they have a nice Monday night game here if you're looking to stream somebody, and they have this Wednesday game against LA. So that's going to be a tougher matchup, but they do play Monday, Wednesday, so 2 light nights. And that will definitely come in handy if you're looking to start somebody maybe for these 2 games, maybe that Thursday game, and then drop that player and pick somebody up from one of these teams that has the weekend back-to-back. But as I mentioned before, the best schedule is Columbus. Let's look at some Columbus waiver ads. And there are some guys, pretty much everybody in their lineup is available in a 12-team league. At least one of these guys will be available in a 12-team league. You've got Boone Jenner, 4-game point streak, 4 goals, 1 assist, 5 points in his last 4 games, 58% owned. So he's probably there for you in a 10-team league, maybe there for you in a 12-team league. I've been switching between him and Trocheck as the complete player that I'm looking for my centers in my category league. So he was one of those guys that I had for a long time. He stopped producing, dropped him to the waiver wire, and he picks up 4 goals. So that's how that works sometimes. Zach Werenski is available in a lot of leagues, and I did just pick him up. 8 assists in his last 9 games. He had a 5-game point streak in there, and he also had a 4-assist game in that game where they scored 7 goals. So Werenski's the power play quarterback. He's the guy who usually gets the shot volume and is around a 20-goal pace defenseman, which is very rare to find. He was injured last year, so he's not on a lot of people's radars. 53% owned. If he's there, I would definitely go scoop him up. If he's not there, you have Provorov, who is getting some power play time on PP2. They've been, Provorov was getting the PP1 time with Werenski out. Now that he's back, I would assume that they're just kind of going back and forth, trying to find some chemistry on that power play. 1 goal, 3 assists in his last 5 games. And then you also have Kirill Marchenko. He's line 1 with Jenner and Goudreau. As I just mentioned, Jenner is red hot, so you might want access to Marchenko. 9% owned. He's got a goal and an assist in his last 3 games. And I've been kind of just riding him in one of my leagues. He's not the most effective player, but every now and then he comes through with a power play goal or something like that. So I've been riding that as well. And you can see they have that perfect schedule, so these guys will get in your lineup pretty much every single one of those nights. But the other team that we wanted to talk about, and not much has changed from last week, is the New York Rangers. Basically the exact same graphic you saw last week. I just updated the stats. These are the guys you're going to want to target for the most part. Now, Vincent Trocheck went from 65% owned to 70%, and he did cool off just a touch. Didn't have all that many points this past week. 1 assist. I believe it was a power play assist. I could be wrong. But he's got 12 points in the 9 games since Philip Hedl left with a concussion. So in that void with Hedl on the IR, they've put Trocheck in on the second line with Panarin and Lafreniere. And even though Panarin cooled down for 2 games there as well, and Lafreniere hasn't been as hot, that line is still very productive. They had some other guys step up. Zibanejad was ice cold. He stepped up over the weekend. Kreider stepped up over the weekend. So that top line is going to get you some points. And the only way you can get exposure to that is through Blake Wheeler at 9% owned. He's a single position right wing, 2 assists last week, and he is getting that garden seat with Kreider and Zibanejad. So if you want that, that's the only way to get access to the top 6, unless you're going to get one of these 2 guys. And these guys are probably there for you in shallower leagues. Lafreniere, not necessarily the most productive player. 12 points in 19 games isn't the best, but this is the best we've ever seen from him, and he is scoring. So it's a goal-heavy 12 points, 8 goals in those 19 games. Now, another thing to keep your eye on, Eric Gustafsson. He's got 5 assists, 3 power play points in his last 6 games. He's been red hot. He had a 7-game point streak in there as well. 36% owned, but Adam Fox could be back off LTIR as soon as the 29th. He has been skating. There's no indication that he will be back on the 29th, but that's the earliest he can come back, and that's right in the middle of this week. So if he comes back, Gustafsson will lose that PP1 spot. He might just go right back to PP2, so he might get some power play time, but it will probably be the last 30, 45 seconds instead of the garden seat that he's on right now with the first unit. So that is something to keep in mind if you have Gustafsson. Maybe just keep that in the back of your mind. Drop him on Wednesday or Thursday if you have to. Pick up another defenseman, and there are some other guys we'll talk about in this video. Now, there's also one other Ranger that we do have to touch on, and that is Jonathan Quick. This is incredible. I could not have been more wrong about a player in the preseason. I basically was telling everybody that would listen that he's not an NHL goalie anymore. He had an .800 save percentage in preseason. He was averaging 3 or 4 goals against a game, and it was just abysmal. He comes in the regular season, and it's a totally different goaltender. 40% owned, so he's probably there for you on your waiver wire. 7 starts, 6 wins, 1.99 goals against, .930 save percentage, 2 shutouts. He's undefeated, so it's in regulation. So I believe it's 6-0-1 in his starts. And again, 2 shutouts, the .930 save percentage, the 1.99 goals against. He was leading the league in goals against until yesterday. I believe that 4 goals against game probably knocked him back to second. But this is incredible. Did not see this coming. You can see here, goals saved above expected, 96th percentile, 91st percentile in save percentage, 96th in goals against. So incredible numbers from Quick. He's technically speaking outplaying Shesterkin right now, which is, again, another thing I never thought I would say. And he will get one of these games on the weekend. He might get this game against San Jose, which would be, I don't want to say an easy win because there's not many of those in the league nowadays, but you're looking at the best team in the NHL against the worst team in the NHL. So it looks like it would be a nice place to start Jonathan Quick. And if you have him, you might as well hold on to him for right now, because if there's any chance of him playing, he's playing incredibly well. The defense is pretty good in front of him, despite what you see here. They have been really stout. They gave up a couple goals in the last game, but they're still playing really well in front of him. And this is definitely a guy you're going to want access to. He's one of the better streaming options. But there are a number of other goaltenders that we want to look at. So let's move over to the Goalie Hub and go over some trends. So we just talked about Jonathan Quick, but there's another guy who's really playing well right now, who's only 26% owned, and that is Connor Ingram. He's a 72 when you round up here on the Goalie Hub, 2.7 goals against, 919 save percentage, just picked up a shutout against Vegas, no less, and then 4.1 above expected. The team defense is not as bad as you would think, 52nd percentile in terms of team defense, team expected goals against per game. So the team is playing pretty well, and Connor Ingram is currently outplaying the other goaltender there, which is Karel Vejmelka. Trying to find him. He's probably way down here a little bit. Yep, there's Vejmelka. So if you compare the two, it's not really much of a comparison. He's sub 900 save percentage, 3.5 goals against, way below expected. So right now it looks like Ingram might be the starter in Arizona, and he is 26% owned, as I just mentioned. Now, if you look here, Sorokin has been playing better. He's improved 14.6 week over week, now has a 17 save percentage, 3.0 goals against, and he is above expected, which he was a little bit below expected previously. But the other thing that I wanted to bring to your attention was Semyon Varlamov, who is 33% owned. And his numbers have been incredible all season long. 930 save percentage, 2.3 goals against, 5.8 above expected. Team defense still not great on Long Island, which is not good, and that's why they've been kind of struggling. They don't necessarily score a lot, so they have to play good defense, and they currently are not. But Varlamov has been putting up really good numbers, and he's only 33% owned. Now, in terms of shallow leagues, this is a guy that I've never really given out in terms of fantasy because of that team defense exposure, and he's been getting lit up year over year, facing 35, 40 shots. Last year, they were averaging 35 plus shots against towards the end of the year, which is just not good for your goaltenders. But John Gibson is playing really well this year. He's 62% owned, so probably not there in a deep league, but in a shallow league, he might be there for you. 2.7 goals against, 914 save percentage, 3.3 goals saved above expected, and then he's getting some good save volume as well. The team defense, again, is not necessarily the best, but it is worth noting that I've been kind of dumping on this guy for a long time now, but he is a good goaltender, and he's finally starting to put together some numbers that you can have access to in a fantasy league. Dostal was another guy that I was talking about earlier in the season. His numbers have dropped off a bit. 893 save percentage, 3.8 goals against. He's now below expected. So of the two, Dostal looked like he was taking the net and running with it earlier in the year, but it does seem like it's back to John Gibson, and for good reason. Now, there's a couple of other guys you can have access to. Charlie Lindgren did get beat a little bit more often last game as the Edmonton Oilers got their power play in order. But their team defense is still really good, 2.9 expected goals against per game. He's 7.9 above expected, 926 save percentage, 2.5 goals against. So he is still putting up better numbers than his counterpart, Darcy Kemper, who I think has still been getting the majority of the starts, but he is a little bit lower down here on the goalie rating. You can see the team defense is still pretty good. He's right around expected, but his save percentage 892 and a 3.1 goals against. So right now, of the two, it looks like Lindgren is statistically the better goaltender, specifically for categories leagues where you're going to get docked for some of those save percentage and goals against numbers. And Lindgren is only 24% owned, so that is why we're featuring him here. A couple of guys that you can own. Now, another guy that you can own who, in my mind, should be the starter in Buffalo, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, 2.7 goals against, 914 save percentage, right around expected. The team defense is not great. They haven't been playing well. They just got destroyed by the Devils, and the Devils are not necessarily playing their best hockey right now, but they definitely, had a field day on Buffalo the other night. But UPL 18% owned. So if you're a Levi owner, if you've been streaming Comrie, those guys both were factored into last night's 7-2 loss. So they're not necessarily playing the best. And if we can scroll down here, you can see some of their numbers are not quite as good as UPL, who has been the guy apparently. Comrie all the way down here, one of the worst goaltenders in the league right now at an 877 save percentage. And then Devin Levi, not much better, 876 save percentage, a little bit below expected. So you're not getting what you need out of those guys. And right now, they're getting the best out of UPL. So this would be an option for you if you're looking for a potential starter. 18% owned, probably there for you in at least a 12-team league or better. And then obviously, if you're in a 10-team league, you probably have some better options on your waiver wire. Another guy that I didn't really think I would be talking about, and I have to see if I can find him here because he hasn't been starting a lot, but that is Alex Nedeljkovic. And you saw him a couple days ago score a goal in the AHL, gets called up, puts up a shutout, and then comes back and plays a pretty good game in a 3-2 loss. But 937 save percentage is crazy for Nedeljkovic, who was basically not an NHL goaltender when he was in Detroit. 2.3 goals against, 2.6 above expected. So he's kind of found that form that he had a couple years ago in Carolina, which is nice to see. And he is only 10% owned. So if you're looking for another option, probably a backup option, Tristan Jarry does have the net in Pittsburgh, and he's been playing really well lately. So I don't know how much they're going to go to Nedeljkovic, but he has been playing well when getting the opportunity. Really quickly, a couple of guys that we do have to touch on. Elvis Merzlikins, he's been playing much better lately, if I can find him, just slightly above Nedeljkovic, but total save volume is crazy because their team defense is atrocious. He is right around expected. The 905 save percentage is not bad considering how much he's getting shelled, but if you're in a points league that has point weighting for total saves, he's going to get you a lot of those, and it's a 4-game week this week with no back-to-backs, so he might be relied upon for at least 3 of those games. His backup has been pretty good this year as well. Spencer Martin, I've featured a couple times on here, but Merzlikins has been playing a lot better. He's improved 7.4 week over week, so thought I'd bring him into the conversation. He's 30% owned. Another guy that you might want to look at is James Reimer, 13% owned. This is a Detroit play. Detroit obviously beat Boston the other day. Really impressive win, but Reimer's got a 917 save percentage, 2.3 goals against. The team defense is pretty good, 60th percentile there, so he's right around or a little bit above expected, so you're not getting anything crazy there, but he is playing really well right now, and they've kind of been going back and forth between him and Husso. I'm not exactly sure what the start volume has been, but they're right here neck and neck with each other on the goalie hub, so a little bit below expected for Husso. His save percentage is much worse, the goals against is higher. So right now, of the two, Reimer seems to be the better option, and he's 13% owned. So here's a couple of goaltending options for you, but now let's get to the player streams this week. So we're going to break this down by shallow league and deep league players. These are 8 to 10 to 12 team leagues. You might find some of these guys here. Nichushkin is probably not available for you in most leagues, but for whatever reason, if he is available, go pick him up right now. 11 points, 5 power play points in a 7-game point streak, 7 goals, and 4 assists in that span. If you're looking at his hub, just a shade under a point per game, just a shade under a goal every other game. He's got a half of an assist per game, just under 3 shots per game. The power play production's there. The hits are there. The blocks are not bad, but they're not great. But he is a 78 completeness rating, so he is doing a little bit of everything. And he is getting that garden seat in the top 6, and then getting the top power play time as well with those 5 power play points in the last 7 games. So he is red hot, 80% owned, dual eligible. If he's available, go and pick him up right now. but he's probably not. So if you're looking for somebody else, if you're in a bangers league, you have to keep your eye on Tom Wilson. Just a little bit under 3 hits per game, which is incredible for a forward. You also have 2.7 shots per game. He had a game this past week, 7 shots and 6 hits in one game. That was I believe the Edmonton game where they didn't score, but he was doing everything but. And right now, a little bit low on the goal production and the point production, but that will come if he's shooting that much. And you're getting a ton of hits out of him. So 50 hits on the season so far. That is really good in only 17 games, which is where you're getting just a shade under 3 hits per game. A goal, 12 shots, 10 hits in his last 3 games. So definitely want to keep your eye on him. He's 45% owned. He is a single position right winger, which does hurt a little bit, but he's been really good in a bangers league format. Now, another guy that we have to talk about, and they do have a 4-game week. All of these players should have 4-game weeks, and that's why they're being featured here. But Ryan O'Reilly, he's one of the best options in Nashville right now. You can find, a lot of guys on the waiver wire that aren't necessarily getting the opportunities that guys like O'Reilly are. Top 6, number 1 line, playing with Philip Forsberg, getting that top power play exposure, 7 points in a 6-game point streak, 3 of those on the power play. He's 54% owned. And real quick, I just want to show you the Nashville breakdown just to show you kind of what you're potentially going to get out of him. So this is a look at the Preds, and right here you have Philip Forsberg, their best player, an 86 on the completeness rating, a 76 on the weighted rating. And then the next best player is Roman Josi. That's to be expected. He's one of those stud defensemen we talk about all the time in the pre-draft. But then you have Ryan O'Reilly. So it's these 3 guys and then the rest. And there are some other guys we'll talk about in a little bit. Gus Nyquist is one of those guys. Novak is hurt. He's not available right now. But just showing you how much better these 3 players have been than the rest of their team, and they do have a 4-game week this week, which is why we're talking about them. Now, another guy we have to talk about is Charlie Coyle, 28% owned, single position center, 4 goals, 3 assists, 7 points in a 5-game point streak. So he's been on fire, and he's one of those guys that's typically a middle 6 player. He's getting the opportunity with Boston, making it count. Just a shade under pretty much the exact same numbers as Nichushkin. 0.95 point per game, 0.45 goals per game, 0.50 assists per game. You're just getting a little bit lower shot volume, but you are getting some blocks and you are getting some hits out of him. So a little bit different way that he's being used. The power play production is a little bit lower than Nichushkin, but the number overall is the same. And the ownership is much, much lower at 28%. He does play a different position, so it is going to be a different factor in terms of if you're going to get him in the lineup or not. And they do have some heavy night games this week on the Tuesday, Thursday, Saturdays. But with that said, he is red hot right now. So if you're looking for a center, Ryan O'Reilly's a good option. Charlie Coyle's a good option. And another good option, one of the only good options in terms of San Jose Sharks, is Thomas Hertl. He's been hitting a little bit as well, getting some blocks. He is getting some power play production, so 6 power play points in 21 games. The shot volume is not bad, but it's a little bit low for my taste, 2.24. The assists are really nice, 0.57 assists per game, and the raw point per game number is a little bit low, 0.76 for a guy of his caliber. He's usually around a point per game type of player. But he has been playing pretty well. So a point per game over his last 9 games, 3 goals, 6 assists, 3 of those on the power play, and he's only 35% owned. So one of the only Sharks that you're going to want to target in a shallow league. And I know that nobody wants to talk about this player because he did something incredibly stupid the other day, slashing a guy in the head. I do think it was sort of reactionary. It was not premeditated, but that doesn't excuse it. It should probably be suspendable. But Jacob Trouba, despite that, is putting up insane numbers. If you're looking for that hits and blocks defenseman in a shallow league, 100th percentile in blocks per game, leads the NHL, 3.53 blocks per game is insane. Just in my memory, I don't remember seeing a guy with a decent sample size putting up 3.5 blocks per game at any point over the last 2 years. So this is incredible in terms of his block number. His hit number is really good as well. 2.37 hits per game, 96th percentile there, and 88th percentile for defensemen in shots per game. So not getting a ton of power play time. In fact, not getting any power play time lately, with Gustafsson taking the power play 1 and then Keandre Miller on power play 2. But With that said, he is getting a ton of hits and blocks, getting some shot volume, and picking up a couple of points along the way. He does have, if I'm looking at it, 8 points in 19 games, so not the end of the world, just a shade under a half a point per game, but he is a must own if you have hits and blocks in your categories league, or if you're getting specific weighting for those things in a points league, because he is racking them up. If you just get 1 point per hit and 1 point per block, he's putting up 5 points per game in pretty much that kind of a league format for point weighting. So definitely a must own. And obviously that slash was crazy and he should probably be suspended for that, but that's out of our control. Now we get on to the deeper league streams this week, and we'll start it off with a player I talked about a couple weeks ago, Kalen Addison. I was talking about him when he was on the Minnesota Wild. He comes over to the Sharks, and I didn't know who was running their power play. And I believe it was Jacob McDonald, if I'm not mistaken, but now it's Kalen Addison. 4 assists, 3 of those on the power play in his last 4 games. He's only 3% owned. Doesn't really get a ton of hits, but he does block a couple shots. But 92nd percentile in power play points per game. That's going to be what you're owning him for. They do have a 4-game week this week. It's not the best team or the best power play to get exposure to, but if you're looking for a specific power play quarterback and some of the guys that we talked about earlier aren't available, guys like Werenski and Provorov, you could try to pick up Kalen Addison. It's going to be assist heavy, but he is going to get you some power play points. Now, another shallow league play you could go for is JJ Peterka. This is not necessarily the best option just because of the exposure. Right now, Dylan Cousins is not playing that well. Tage Thompson is out, and they just got killed against New Jersey the other day, but they are looking for offense somewhere, and Peterka is a point-per-game player over his last 8 games. 3 goals, 5 assists, 2 of those on the power play, so 21% owned, single-position right winger. He is probably available for you in most 12-team and up leagues, so he's definitely an option, getting some power play time and playing in their top 6, and he's probably one of the better options in Buffalo right now, all things considered, so just something to keep an eye on. If you're in a 24-team league, you can try to find Michael Asamont. Nobody owns him, so he is probably going to be available for you there. 1.6 hits per game is nice. As you can see, 9 hits in his last 4 games, but he also has 3 assists and a power play point, 10 shots and 4 blocks in his last 4 games. So not necessarily the most productive offensive player, typically a role player, 3rd, 4th liner, but he is getting a little bit of an elevated role right now. He is on the second line with Cirelli and Stamkos, according to Daily Faceoff. So if he's getting that line assignment right now, that is the reason to own him, and he's 0% owned, so he is available in every league. So just wanted to bring him to your attention. But another guy that you might want to have access to, and he's probably available for you in almost every single league format, is Gus Nyquist. I mentioned him last week, and when I did that, he was 2% owned. He had 5 points in a 4-game point streak. This week, he's 10% owned, 7-game point streak, a goal, 8 assists, 9 points, 2 power play points, but the only problem is the shot volume. Only 2 shots per game. You'd like to see a little bit more out of Nyquist, but everything else is looking good. The assists, the power play production, and a 7-game point streak. He's 10% owned, single position left winger, and they do have a 4-game week this week, as all of these players do. So probably one of the better options here on the waiver wire. Another guy you could go to, he's playing right now, and that is Philip Kurashev. And without knowing what he's doing right now, he has a 5-game point streak that he could potentially add to as he's playing. But right now, line 1 with Bedard and Reichel, 6 points in that 5-game point streak. That's why the asterisk is there. 2 goals, 4 assists. He's only 6% owned, so he's probably there for you in most league formats. The shot volume is a little bit low. You'd like to see it up above 2, but he is a point per game player, so that's kind of crazy considering the fact that Chicago is not necessarily the best team. They're not necessarily the worst team either, which is encouraging to see if you're a Blackhawks fan. But anyone playing with Connor Bedard and Lucas Reichel, both of those guys are probably ownable. Kurashev and Reichel, I should say. Bedard is definitely owned up, but these 2 guys playing with Bedard are guys you're going to want access to, especially now that Corey Perry has left the team and they're looking for some offensive help, potentially on that first power play unit. So Kurashev is a decent option this week. And then last but not least, we have Ross Colton, a guy that I mentioned last week in the Avalanche section. not much has changed. So 6 points, a power play point, 16 shots, 11 hits in his last 7 games. You're getting 1.55 hits per game on the season. The shot volume is pretty good at 2.45, and the goal production is pretty good. He's a center left wing, so he's dual position eligible, 25% owned, and he's getting you exposure to the top 6 in Colorado, which is what you would potentially want him for. I do believe he's getting some power play time, but I could be wrong about that. So in the meantime, Ross Colton, one of the few dual position players that is in this deep league section, but you can probably find him in a lot of 12-team and up leagues. Maybe not there for you in your 16 to 20-team leagues, but thought I'd mention him here just because he's been so productive. He is dual eligible, and he's getting you exposure to the Avalanche. But that's going to do it for this video. Hopefully you got some value out of this. If you did, let me know in the comments section below. As always, I will see you in the next one.